Welcome to our second ever CCFLT Early Career Language Teacher Hangout. Very excited this evening to be joined by Mira Canion. Before we get to Mira, I'm going to introduce Paulino Brenner, who's here to co-host and assist with all things technology. Paulino.
Hi, hey everyone. I'm really just here to be behind the scenes. I want to remind you that we are live and you can ask any questions you want to Myra. I'm sure she will have an answer. Now, how to do that? You can post a comment on the Google Plus page or the event page, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment there. If you're on Twitter like Noah and I, you can post your questions with a tweet using the hashtag CCFLT15. So we hope to have some of your comments or questions coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paulino. And if you are having any trouble accessing us or just posting your questions to Myra, reach out to Paulino. He's amazing about taking care of you and your needs live. Without further ado, Mira Canion, acclaimed language teacher, author, advocate for the profession. Thank you so much for being here with us this Monday evening.
Well, thank you.
So our objective here by CCFLT, the Colorado Congress of Foreign Language Teachers, is really to help out early career language teachers. And we were really excited to get you to come on with us here in February because this can be just such a tough time of year for all of us, but especially early career teachers where, you know, on one hand, it feels like you've already made it, what should be, you know, halfway through or more of your first year teaching, and yet, you know, it can feel like the finish line's a really long way off. And so just kind of going off of that, Myra, you know, what advice can you offer for language teachers who might be just really looking for supports on getting through the rest of the year?
Well, good thing we have Monday off, right? So President's Day weekend, so you got a couple of those days coming up where you just kind of look forward to a couple of 3-day weekends. But the big question about how to get across that hump of, you know, February and March is CCFLT. The conference is coming up at the end of the month, and I think that's one of the reasons why we as an organization have always put that big conference in February, because of exactly what you're saying, and that is it just seems like the snow keeps coming and the pile of work just keeps coming and there's no end in sight, like you said. So join us at that conference for number one, and hook up with a lot of people at that and try to figure out, you know, some of the connections you could make, you know, to make it through. Keep the balance. The weather's getting nice outside. Make sure you're outside getting some fresh air. Colorado's great for that. One day it's snowing, one day it's just beautiful weather here. And those are just a few, you know, a few tips to get through it, and know that it's always crazy, and the end of the year just keeps creeping up towards you, and yet you have all that stuff, so you kind of get smashed, is what I say, like in April and May, where things you don't have.
Yeah, I can remember how it just always like creeps up on you, where one second it feels like the year's never going to end, and the next second it's all the way over. You know, I just want to go back to something you touched on, Myra, there with the connections piece. You talked about connecting with folks at the conferences, but can you also talk about something that we all see you doing a lot on Facebook and other social media, and that's just connecting with other mentors and teachers who are there to help you?
Yeah, well, you know, I learned very early in my career. I remember coming into one of the February conferences at CCFLT, and in fact, it was Janine Erickson, who later became our actual president, who took me in, and I said, I don't know a good session, and she took me down, and there was Chris Wells standing in the front of the room and just going a mile an hour showing how to put different things on a map and using the target language, and from there it just kind of grew, kind of like the vines or the the roots of an aspen tree. It just keeps going and going and going, and you just make connections in it. And so that's kind of what I look at Facebook and Twitter as well, is you're just always connecting. For example, you need a lesson plan on a certain song. You need, how would I do a unit on a particular social issue? How would I use this textbook like this? What about an assessment? I mean, there's so many people just in our state alone that could connect you with different people that are solving the very same problem. Why reinvent the wheel when CCFLT has 5 or 6 of them ready to go for you? So that's how I've seen that work for me.
That's really awesome. You know, but I want to back up just in case there's any teachers who are watching this and thought you were going kind of fast as they were taking notes, trying to write down this alphabet soup of organizations. You mentioned CCFLT, ACTFL, our regional organizations. Can you just kind of back up and slowly go back over that for our early career teachers who, you know, a lot of us taught for years before we even knew some of these organizations are there to support us as professionals?
Sure. CCFLT is the Colorado Congress of Foreign Language Teachers. Celebrated its 50th year a few years back, and it's one of the state organizations that puts on a conference February, and then there's another one-day conference, and that is usually in September or October, and we have a website with a newsletter that comes out at least 3 or 4 times a year. And then that links into our regional groups. There's 5 regional groups, and we're within the Southwest COLT region that goes all the way out to Hawaii and includes the big states of California and Texas. And then we also belong to ACTFL. So ACTFL is the national organization, and they have a conference every November. And we send delegates from CCFLT to there. We send sessions to Southwest COLT that happens to be this very year here in Colorado. So the regional conferences move around, and so they link to the different organizations that are state conferences, and they hook up to them and then have what's called like a joint conference every year. So those are just in a nutshell, the conferences for the year, or the organizations.
That's really great information for any early career teacher who doesn't know about those organizations. And one quick plug, we mentioned that Southwest COLT includes Hawaii, and it's a 9-state region, and we'd be remiss if we did not mention next year's conference is in Hawaii. So start bugging your principal right now, right?
Right.
So we do have our first question. Anna has a question for you about conducting oral assessments, and a huge one for this time of year. What do you have to offer Anna on that, Myra?
So how do you do that? Well, it's funny you say that. I just used Google Voice today in class, and I have right here off my phone, I have kids calling into my Google Voice number, which is now my actual phone number on my iPhone, and they were doing some kind of an activity that involved speaking. So that's one way that I use it, but I think a lot of times what I do is that I don't wait for that final exam. I'm constantly talking to kids back and forth, trying to figure out, poking and prodding a little bit, if they know the vocabulary, backing up if I need to, using visuals. And so I'm constantly doing a formal assessment, which means I am asking them questions, and I do kind of have a very instinctive idea of where they're at, so that in the summative assessment, like maybe it's at the end of the year, if you have something that's big, I kind of already know how they're going to perform because I've heard them many times. We do another things like shoulder partner. Turn to your partner and maybe describe something. A photograph. Here, take a look at this, and with a partner or with a small group, come up with how would you talk about that photo. I had 2 native speakers, so I have a native speaker class first hour, and the second hour I have a Spanish 1 class. So the two of the native speakers stayed behind, their peers, they're both 7th grade, and then I had them just randomly ask somebody in the crowd, somebody that they knew, somebody from the class, and ask them, had the vocabulary kind of sitting there in front of the native speakers, and I said, here, ask somebody in the class a question, just to get a sense. They don't know anything about slow speed. They know nothing about that. And so it was just authentic. And the person actually said something like this: would you like to go to the park? And my student knew enough Spanish that gustaría didn't throw her. And she said, sí, yes. And the student kept going and said, at what time? Regular speed, and she got it. And so what the class saw there was, hey, look, I mean, you didn't even have to worry about that, little variance there. So there's all different types of ways you can do that oral assessment. So the kids, there's so many tools out there to have kids record. But as you know, and this Google Hangout is really making it a point on me, is that when you can't see people's reaction, if you don't know, like, did I say something right? Was it me? Did I mispronounce that? It's kind of hard to communicate. And so when we use tools like Google Voice, we have to remember that part of it is missing, and to counteract that and have lots of face-to-face conversations. Just little things. Hey, what'd you do this weekend? Or, didn't you see that movie? Did you like it? Etc. So just a couple of, hope I answered part of that at least.
Yeah, those are really great suggestions you give in. And one kind of follow-up question before we go to our next live question is, in talking about how you actually conduct the oral assessment, so moving off of strategies for how to assess, more just the process and classroom management wise. Can you quickly touch on, how you, maybe especially, I just key on what you said about Google Voice, but how do you manage the classroom while doing your oral assessments?
Well, I mean, there's a couple different ways. Like if it's a very summative, I might bring the kids up in front of class while everybody else is working on something else, maybe an essay, maybe an activity that they're doing, and assess them that way. I've also done stations where I bring up a very small group of kids, and then the other kids are rotating on the station. They're maybe doing something with reading. There may be another one is doing something with the vocabulary sheet, something maybe out of the textbook, and then I'm working 1 on 4, 1 on 5 with the group, assessing them back and forth, having like a restaurant conversation. Another one I might do is with the Google Voice, like I said, with the phone, where they're actually calling. I have the instructions written on the board, and then they're really quiet, and you do it at the end of class, so they know they have to get it done, and lunchtime is coming up, so hey, the management is a lot easier.
That is just brilliant. Our next question has to do with motivating students, especially in the older grades. Senor Perez is saying hi from Baltimore, and he's wondering about what are some interesting ways to motivate 11th and 12th grade students in the world language classroom.
To motivate them. Well, are you talking about 11th and 12th graders, or is that...
Yes, it looks like 11th and 12th graders is who he's asking.
Graders. Okay. They're a little bit tougher, they're on the way out, in some senses ready to explore the world, but just really have to, I think it was with anybody, you have to find what they're really excited about. And you can't overemphasize that enough. Like, for example, the Grammys were on last night. So you can quickly, with a couple of questions, figure out who watched them, who's interested in them, who is looking at the dress, maybe that somebody has, the red carpet, the music, the instruments. I mean, there's a whole gamut of stuff you can use just from last night with that question. So motivating them is finding that purpose, having them really connect their interest with the Spanish you're teaching them. Because after all, it's communication. So if you're not motivated to talk to anybody, there's no communication. So what are they interested in talking about? And sometimes it's just tweaking the question. For example, somebody I was talking to was going to ask the question, what did you give your mother as a present, is what the question was. It was in German. I said, well, what if nobody says anything? So how about you say, what would Selena Gomez give Justin Bieber as a present, right? So I know they're broken up. I understand that. But maybe it would be something like, I don't really like you, like a Valentine, don't be my Valentine or whatever, but tweak it out such that it's just a crazy scenario. So you're actually Justin Bieber and you're receiving a Valentine. Valentine's Day is coming up. So have it intersect with things they like to do. It's cars, it's prom, it's getting out of school. You know, that might be a topic. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I think that you are just such a master of personalizing it for your students and just making it about them and using that as a hook. That's just something I've always really liked about you and your style, Myra. Our next question has to do going back to kind of the assessment and not just what we know, but about how can we prove it to our administrators. We know our students and their oral performance, but how can we then translate into something that our administrators are going to understand? And I would add to that, Myra, especially if that administrator doesn't speak the target language.
Well, that's usually the case, isn't it? Because I think sometimes what we do is we look at what our students can do, and then we say, wow, look at that growth. Look what they're producing. Look how fast they're speaking, too. And look how they're reacting to me, and I'm speaking normal speed. So I'm actually presenting at our conference this month, and it's called How to Make True Learning Visible. So it hits exactly what you're talking about. It's going through activities that I'm going to show you such that you can make that thinking that kids are doing visible to anybody. It's by tweaking and asking questions that are just slightly different so the kids are actually showing what's going on. One, for example, is quiz trade. And that's taking the questions you normally ask and putting them on index cards and then going around giving everybody a card, and then I'm going to ask you a question. What'd you have for dinner last night? Your card might say, what's your favorite movie? And then we're trading the card after we answer it. And so what we're seeing is the kids take control of maybe a conversation. So that's part of it for administrators. But the other part is just having the kids document that too. And that might be like with the I can statements from ACTFL. They have a bunch of statements that say, I can do this, or I can do something related to your theme, and have them actually write, this is what I can do. And document that September, October, November, and then look at it again towards the end, the mid of the semester in the spring, and give the kids their original, some of the things they did originally, maybe in the written or the speaking, give them back to them from their portfolio and say, look at how much you've improved. Why don't you write again, I can. What can you do now that you couldn't do? And that's that evidence piece.
Sharing that growth with them is just so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you talk about rubrics at all with that when you're talking about measuring the growth? Can you share with an early career teacher just what are some rubric strategies that can not only save them frustration but also time?
Rubrics and time. Okay. I think with a rubric, it gets kind of out of hand when you have 5 and 6 and 7 different boxes. And if you just can narrow it down, maybe to message, then you have something like pronunciation or grammar, because I think those two kind of impede the message sometimes. You could put that in there, and just limit yourself to maybe only 2 or 3 of the rubric boxes. So when you're grading it, you're not going through going, what is going on? I mean, you're like, 10 over there, 5 over there, and then have it. What I've done in the past is I've just weighted things too. Different categories have different weights to them that you want. You know, the message might be a heck of a lot bigger in your classroom, and grammar might not be as important maybe for level 1 as it is for level 4. So you can start weighting that mathematically. And then
do I hear you saying, just going back to something you just said, Myra, do I hear you saying that you know, we have kind of, you're giving us permission to not grade everything, to maybe just look at what is our lesson objective and grade them, you know, on that particular assessment, stick to the objective maybe, and instead of, you know, putting red ink through every single thing that they're saying or writing.
Exactly. Yeah. Pick one category maybe and just grade everything with the one category. What's the message? Was the message, you know, like today what I did with my the two native speakers. They asked the student, hey, do you want to go to the park with me? She understood it. She got a 10, you know, 10 out of 10. She got it. There was no miscommunication at all. Why go back through and say vocabulary is good, and you got it. You're ready to roll.
That is so positive and just great feedback for the kids. Want to again thank Paulino for helping us out, and remind everyone you can post your questions for Mira Canion, who's joining us to talk early career language teacher supports. You can post on our Google Plus page, on the YouTube page. You can put in your comments. You can also tweet at us with hashtag CCFLT15. And with that, we'll go to our next question, Myra. This one is also about classroom management. What tips or techniques do you have for executing classroom management while staying in the target language? And Myra, if you could also in there throw out something about the kind of recommended ACTFL target language percentage there as well.
Yes. ACTFL recommends 90% staying in the target language. So I've seen various statements made that the kids should actually be staying in the target language as well. And so I think when you have the kids, as far as classroom management, come in and do the same thing every day, or they know what they're supposed to be doing with very, very little verbal cues from you, that's where you can keep it in the target language. You also can keep it in the target language and keep the management under control when you pick those topics and you understand when kids are really, really into the lesson and when they're not, and knowing when to pull them in and whether to let them go. So if it's really waning with their interest or with their energy level, you just push them to the next activity very easily, you know, if you already know what they're doing. But I think especially those routines in middle school, what I'm finding is those routines are really, really helpful, that they know what they're supposed to do, this is what we're doing, and then you don't have to, you know, move them from one place to the other. Use in English.
When you say routines, what's an example of a routine or two in the target language?
Well, routine that you don't have to use language much at all is that something maybe is written on the board that they come in. That might be a routine for you. You might have something like a warm-up or a do now. That's always on the board. You might have them come in and pull their notebook from the shelf, or they're supposed to get their notes out. That's a routine, and when they sit down, that's what they're supposed to be doing. You could start class with free voluntary reading. They come in, they pick a book, they sit down, they know they're supposed to do that. So those are those routines that kind of manage what people do when they come in. It's not a free-for-all. So those are just a couple.
And for any teachers who maybe don't have that toolbox of routines and rituals already packed, where can they go to get those, either online or even just within their own buildings?
You know, I would start with the building, because every building is different as far as the culture of the student and what's expected. And so I would start there. Middle school is a little bit different game than high school. Urban setting might be different than a rural setting, all those kind of things. And then the other thing I would recommend is a book by Fred Jones. He talks about classroom management. There's a lot of great stuff in that book. It's been out for many years now, so check that one out as far as the all that stuff. But the best way, Noah, to get all those routines and get a list of it is CCFLT, the conference. There'll be enough people to connect you to the right person who knows that answer.
That is so true. And I can just remember in my early years teaching that the first time I found out about CCFLT, it was a lifesaver, and I have not missed a single one since, and try and make it to the regional conferences as well. Before getting to thanking Myra, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who took the time to join us this evening and post their questions, watch live. For anyone who watches this recorded on YouTube, thank you so much. Paulino, thank you so much for being on hand to host. And for anybody who doesn't know, Paulino has his own show that you can watch. Paulino, do you want to give a quick plug?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. I've been doing some interviews with some teachers as well. The show is called Educators, Performers, Creators, and sometimes I interview outside of the language teacher realm. But the next one coming up soon, it's with Sarah Elizabeth Cottrell, who is going to be presenting a Central State. And on Saturday, February 28th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm going to be interviewing her, and she's going to give us some great tips, including information about her upcoming presentation at Central State. So don't miss it. More information at epcshow.com. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you so much for the heads up on that. For anybody who doesn't know Sarah Elizabeth, she's a great language teacher, great professional collaborator who does a ton to support teachers in the language learning community, and she really does a lot of sharing, especially around authentic resources. So definitely check her and Paulino out on Saturday, February 28th. And Mira Canion, just thank you so much for taking time out of your Monday night. In addition to just all you do as a writer, we all love your novellas, and as a teacher, what you do for your students and your service and leadership in the state and regional and national level for the profession. But especially just tonight, thank you for taking a half hour out of your Monday evening to learn and share with us. And to all of our viewers, we are doing this the second Monday of every month. It is brought to you by CCFLT, the Colorado Congress of Foreign Language Teachers. And good night, Myra. Good night, Paulino.
Buenas noches.
Good night.
And buenas noches to all of our viewers. Ciao, ciao.